A double-masted ketch cut through the mist-laden waters of Cape Kirita. Her figurehead, a fearsome sea dragon carved from obsidian, seemed to glower at the world with eternal defiance. As the ship known as the Dauntless anchored in the bay, the chain rattled down into the deep, sending ripples across the water's surface. The settlement of Cape Kirita lay ahead, a cluster of wooden structures clinging to the edge of the cliffs like barnacles on a ship's hull. Small fishing boats dotted the bay, their occupants pausing to gape at the imposing vessel now looming in their midst. A man stands on the deck of the ship, his figure obscured by the heavy cloak billowing around him. As he raised a hand in greeting to one of the local boats, the cloak shifted, revealing the intricate tattoos that wound their way up his arms and neck. His face was shadowed beneath the brim of a wide hat, but he grinned as he climbed down the rigging toward the approaching vessel. The boat rowed toward the shore, the rower stealing glances at the strange figure seated before him. The man's skin, weathered by salt and sea, marked him as an experienced sailor, but the tattoos revealed something more. They were the signs of the waterborne whose prowess in the ocean bordered the supernatural. A harpoon was strapped to his back, and beneath his cloak, the faint outline of a brass fiddle could be seen. "Might I ask who you are?" the rower ventured, curiosity getting the better of him. "And why in the seven hells did you bring a fiddle?" he added with a smirk. The stranger's gaze moved from the island to the man rowing, and with a grin he replied, "Well, my good man, I am Captain Idris Kaan. And I brought my fiddle so those bastards on the ship won't try to toss it overboard again." The rower chuckled, shaking his head at the peculiar yet charming figure before him. When they reached the beach, Kaan stepped onto the sand, his boots leaving deep imprints in the wet earth. He flicked a half-coin to the rower, the expected payment for services rendered. The coin gleamed in the rower's hand, and he nodded as Kaan pushed the boat back into the water. Without pausing, Kaan began to walk toward the settlement, his strides purposeful, his gaze fixed on the largest building that loomed ahead. The structure was made of stone, more substantial than the other houses, with a bustle of activity around it. As he approached, Kaan's voice cut through the ambient noise like the crack of a whip. "Ariki!" he shouted, his voice carrying authority. "Ariki Dex, are you there?" Workers paused in their tasks, stealing glances at Idris as he strode through the settlement. He could hear the quiet murmurs from behind him, but he paid them no mind. He was here for Ariki, and he hoped she could provide the much-needed help he sought. As someone approached, Idris steeled himself, ensuring that his smile remained fixed, even as he recognized the figure walking toward him. The woman was striking in both presence and appearance, her movements exuding confidence and an air of command. She wore a naval coat of deep indigo, adorned with the insignia of a ship's officer, the fabric tailored perfectly to her athletic form. The coat's brass buttons gleamed in the muted light, and a finely crafted cutlass hung at her hip, its hilt worn but clearly well cared for. Her hands, gloved in supple leather, rested casually at her sides, but there was a tension in her stance that spoke of readiness. This was a woman who had seen battle and would not hesitate to draw her weapon if the need arose. As she drew nearer, the scent of salt and sea mingled with the faintest trace of something floral, a subtle hint of perfume that contrasted with her otherwise stern appearance. The silver earring in her left ear, adorned with a small, glimmering gem, caught the light, and Idris's gaze lingered on the familiar object. When she spoke, her voice was clear and strong, carrying easily over the sound of the waves crashing against the shore. "Captain Kaan," she began, her tone measured, yet edged with something more, perhaps a hint of amusement or maybe challenge. "I heard the Dauntless had docked, but I never imagined you would be so bold as to shout my name across the settlement." She stopped a few paces away from him, her gaze steady as she took in his appearance, her eyes lingering on the harpoon strapped to his back and the fiddle slung beneath his cloak. The wind tugged at her long blonde hair, which was tied back loosely. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, weighed him up and down without revealing her thoughts. "What brings you to Cape Kirita, Idris? Business or something more nefarious?" The way she said his name suggested a familiarity between them, one tempered by the formalities of their current exchange. Her eyes narrowed slightly, a small frown creasing her face as she awaited his response. "Well, perhaps we can do something to earn those supplies?" Idris asked her with a hopeful voice, his tone edging on desperate. Ariki stroked her chin, her brow furrowing in thought. "Maybe." She let the silence linger, the weight of her decision hanging in the air before she finally released her chin. "Follow me. There might be something you and your crew can do." They walked away from the sea, threading through the winding paths of the settlement until they reached the outskirts. Idris's eyes widened as the landscape came into view. The land was scarred and twisted, with gnarled trees and patches of sickly, discolored earth. "Fucking blight," he whispered. "I've never seen it this bad before." Ariki scoffed, casting a sidelong glance at him. "This is hardly the worst I've seen. Cross the bounds and you'll understand what true blight is." She let her gaze drift over the corrupted land before them. "The settlement is secure and we get plenty of food from the sea and the cliffs, but to earn coin we need iron and lumber for the shipyards. Without them we're not but paupers." Beyond the blighted terrain, Idris spotted a large hill crowned by an enormous tree. "That's the sentinel tree," Ariki commented, noting his gaze. "The area around it remains untouched by the blight, and we used to gather lumber from the woods surrounding it." Her expression darkened. "At least we did until 2 weeks ago. The volcano rumbled, the island shook, and since then the blight has spread, making the journey perilous." "So you want us to find out what happened?" Idris asked, his tone cautious. "I need you to bring food to the outpost first, then return with lumber and iron tools," Ariki replied, turning to face him fully. "I was planning a larger expedition, but that would pull too many people away from important tasks." A smirk crossed her lips. "And as it happens, I've got a ship full of desperate sailors anchored up. Why not make them do it?" She added with a smile. "Lovely. Just what I needed, a stroll through cursed land with a bunch of stubborn wagons," Idris said with exaggerated exasperation, letting his hand rest on the hilt of his harpoon. "Sounds like a party. I suppose asking for a bonus isn't on the table?" "Get that lumber here in one piece and we'll talk," Ariki countered, her smirk widening. "Besides, isn't the thrill of survival enough?" With a dry chuckle, Idris adjusted the strap of his cloak and turned toward the blighted terrain. "Thrill, sure. But I'll take payment in something a bit more tangible. I'll need to prepare and gather the men from my ship. Get the wagons ready by tomorrow morning and we'll leave then." Ariki's gaze followed him as he began to walk away, her voice carrying a hint of concern. "Idris, watch your back out there. The creatures in the blight, they're dangerous. We've sent people toward the outpost and not all have come back alive." Without turning back, Idris raised a hand in acknowledgement, his voice carrying over his shoulder. "I always do, Ariki. I always do."